Jackie's podcast number 18, and we're rolling.
Hello, my name is Jackie Geringer McDermott, and we're recording live from the English Valley History Center. Today is March 1st, 2025. This diary or journal was written by my great-great-aunt, Mary Elizabeth Claypool Wade, who was known as Libby Wade. She was my grandmother's aunt and the matriarch of our very, very large family. Libby lived a half a block east of Main Street in a little house on Oak Street in North English, Iowa until near the end of her life in 1959. She was 71 years old in 1946. Here is a picture of Libby standing in front of the house of her son Wayne down on Clark Street. Notice the porch. Libby will be going down there to cool off in the evenings because it's very hot in July of 1946. I don't remember her, but Libby knew me as a baby. Downtown North English was also the center of my life as I grew up. I would like to introduce you page by page to the cast of characters from North English, Iowa, and the surrounding English Valleys area. July 16th, 1946. Ironed, Mary R. here a while. Rained nearly all day. Cloudy and fog and rain. Reading a book from the rental shelf, The Gauntlet. It sounds like a good day to read a book, and I Googled and found out that Libby was reading a religious-themed book that came out in 1946. July 17th, 1946. A big rain last night. 7 3/4 inches reported from Albia. Sent Anna a letter this morning. Russell didn't come for dinner. Out of town, I suppose. Later, yes, went to Cedar Rapids. Libby gets her news and weather from the radio. Anna Cray is Libby's married daughter. She's right here in this picture. She lives in Texas. Libby's 38-year-old son, Russell, or Tyler Wade, lives in the house with her. July 18th, 1946. Hot, oh so hot. In the 90s and to 101 degrees someplace in the state. I went down to Wayne's in the evening. It was nice on the front porch. Jenny and Helen B. came back with me. Our house is so hot. Breeze expiring and a little rain. Russell got me some blackberries. Libby's oldest son, Wayne, and his wife, Jenny, lived just 1 block south of them on East Clark Street, right behind the business block. Jenny's niece, Helen Bringman, has been staying with them this summer and helped when Jenny was sick, very sick last week. Helen is the sister of Josh Bringman, who later lived in Kinross, and Ruth Ann Herr, who lived north of Sigourney. Libby loves all sorts of fresh fruits and vegetables, so blackberries would be a real treat. July 19th, 1946. Cooler, cloudy. In today's record, it tells of Amy Carter Roberts' death on her way home from here, somewhere in Colorado. Hattie was here. Mary R. brought me some cucumbers. I made blackberry pies. Russell went to see R in the PM. Hattie Newberry Killiam was Libby's 55-year-old neighbor who has moved back to North English to care for her aged mother, Clara Newberry. Mary Wade Rugsager is her 68-year-old neighbor down the block who has a large garden. And this is a picture of her when she was a little girl, Mary R., her friend. Libby reads the North English records and might find it amusing that 79 years later, I am reading that same newspaper to find out exactly who she is talking about. Amy Carter Roberts, here's the article, down here, was the daughter of Louis Aldebert, or L.A. Carter, who is buried at Yankee Point Cemetery, and his wife, Sarah Norris Carter. Amy was one of several children and taught here in the early 1900s. She was in normal school for her training in 1902 and 1903, taught at Conroy in 1904 and Webster in 1905. Amy taught at Yankee Point in the early 1920s, so Libby knew her from her parents being from the area and from her teaching in the area. Amy and several of her sisters ended up living in Bell, California by the early 1940s. When she was in Iowa in 1946, she visited at the Carl Bursler residence and passed away on her way home to California. July 20th, 1946. A nice day. The rodeo is to be tonight and tomorrow. Verdi was here, and also Hattie. Maud and her sister Amy brought me a book to read, David the King. The women of the neighborhood all gather at Libby's to visit, to sew, and to make gifts for others, and to do church or lodge work. Verdi is her good friend, Verdi McKinstry. Hattie Killian is her neighbor. Maud Foster Claypool is Libby's niece by marriage, the wife of her nephew, Ray Claypool. David the King is also a religious book written in 1946, retelling a biblical story. Amy Foster Fawcett is Maud's sister from Philadelphia. I found a nice article from the North English Record from 1962 explaining that their dad, their father, T.M. or Dode Foster, was a druggist in town, and that Amy came here and got Maud, and they made a trip to Vancouver, Washington in 1962 to see their brother Charles Foster for the first time in 45 years, and to go to the Seattle World's Fair and to see California and the Grand Canyon. Now about the rodeo. Large crowds are expected in North English this weekend for performances from Oscar O's Rodeo. 3 shows will be given: Saturday night at 8 o'clock and Sunday afternoon, and Sunday evening at 2 and 8 p.m. west of the Sales Pavilion. A parade will be held Saturday night at 7:30 o'clock, led by the North English High School Band. Anyone having a saddle horse is urged to take part in the parade. Admission prices for the attraction, sponsored by the local American Legion, is $1 for adults and 50 cents for children. The rodeo will bring 80 head of livestock here, including broncs from the Black Hills, Brahma steers and Brahma bulls. Events will include cowboy and cowgirl bronc and steer riding, trick riding, bulldogging, trick and calf roping, rube clowns, rescue race, Palomino High School horse, and Jean Darling and her rangeland buckaroos. Partner, the Jeep jumping horse, will be featured, and the rodeo company is offering a prize of $50 to any of the local talent who can ride the Brahma bull. Free ice water will be available on the grounds. July 21st, 1946. Nice and cool. Not feeling very well after my trip uptown last night. Margaret and Vaughn Bishop were here in the afternoon. He lives in Louisiana. I saw Dorothy May and John last night. Neva was working at the cafe. Hazel and Glenn brought us some apples today. Margaret Bishop was a neighbor, and her relative Vaughn Bishop was visiting from Louisiana. 19-year-old Dorothy May Cray was the niece to her son-in-law, Richard Cray. Neva Cray Kolasic was Dorothy's mother, and also the mother of 9-year-old Johnette Cray, who later married Tom Hudson and lived in Keswick. Neva Cray married Lloyd Burdine later in life and lived in a little green house on Bowen Avenue. John Foster Kolasic was her father, and he was 76 years old in 1946. And Hazel and Glenn Cobb were her married granddaughter and husband who lived nearby. July 22nd, 1946. Washed and canned 3 quarts of apples. Wendell Bauer had a stroke at 11:30 today, Mrs. Bauer told me. Neva and John were here a while. Cooler. Got a letter from Anna and a sugar stamp. Since it is Monday, Libby is doing her wash, as was the custom with many in the past. She is also not letting any of the produce that people give her go to waste. The apple that she cannot use immediately for meals are being canned for later. Wendell Bauer just turned 40 years old and had a stroke today. He is married to Ellen Bear Bauer and is the father of Carol Bauer and his sister Normal and his brother Gerald. Anna Bauer was Wendell's mother and a close neighbor to Libby. Neva Kolasic Cray and John Kolasic were father and daughter, and Neva Cray was married to Wilbur Cray, who was a brother to Libby's son-in-law, Richard Cray. They had recently returned from Texas, where Richard and Anna Cray lived too. Daughter Anna Cray from Texas corresponds with Libby frequently and also sent her a sugar stamp. In 1946, sugar was still rationed in the United States at 15 pounds per year for household use and 15 pounds per year for canning. Sugar was the last product to remain on rationing after the war. The program was discontinued in June of 1947, so Libby wouldn't have needed extra sugar for her canning and was likely glad to get that stamp from Anna. July 23rd, 1946. Ironed in the AM. Russell's sick. Stomach trouble again. Didn't work and didn't eat anything. I went to the booster party at Ressie's. Neva Morse took us. Went to lodge. They planned to have a Rebecca picnic next Sunday. Hot in the AM. Got 3 gallons of berries. Don and Belva went to Bremer's for them. Since there were no permanent press fabrics in those days, many things that were washed needed to be ironed. So Tuesdays were the day that many women ironed. Booster Club that Libby talks about is a church prayer group. Ressie Wilkinson was a friend. Neva Morse was a neighbor who drove them to Ressie's house. Here is a picture of Neva in her centennial dress. And I'll get back to this picture in a few minutes to identify the rest of the people when I finish the diary portion of the program. Rebecca Lodge is a Christian social group that usually meets in the evening in the upstairs brick building at the end of Main Street by just west of Libby's house. Dawn and Belva Yoss were Libby's oldest granddaughter and her husband. And this is Belva right here. They picked fruit for Grandma Libby, knowing she makes delicious use of any gifts of produce. July 24th, 1946. Atomic Dem off of Bikini. I canned blackberries, apples, and beans. Very cool, a nice day to work. Russell's still not able to go back to the home lumber company. Is some better tonight? Mrs. Bursler here in the PM. The atomic demolition at Bikini Atoll in the Pacific Ocean was called Operation Crossroads. It consisted of a pair of nuclear weapons tests conducted by the United States at Bikini Atoll. They were the first nuclear weapon tests since Trinity on July 16, 1945, and the first detonations of nuclear devices since the atomic bombing of Nagasaki on August 9, 1945. The purpose of the test was to investigate the effect of nuclear weapons on warships. The Crossroads tests were the first of many nuclear tests held in the Marshall Islands, and the first to be publicly announced beforehand and observed by an invited audience, including a large press corps. Libby keeps up on the news on her radio, and Mrs. Bursler is a neighbor who was likely there to sew and visit. July 25th, 1946. Rained last night, cool this morning. I canned some cucumber pickles. Russell went back to work today, in the PM only. July 26, 1946. Bertha was here, told of Mrs. Kincaid's death in Cedar Rapids Hospital. They are planning a vacation. John has sold out to Glenn at the oil station. Had a letter from Blanche Milo and one from Anna. Blanche sent shots. Richards are picking cotton. Milan is home, discharged. Bertha Claypool Geringer was Libby's niece and my paternal grandmother. Mrs. Kincaid that she's talking about was an old neighbor, Mrs. Lewis Kincaid, that passed away. John Geringer is my grandfather, Bertha's husband. He had been in a partnership at a gas station uptown with his oldest son, Glenn Geringer, who we called Uncle Spark. Blanche Milo, that sent the pictures, is Libby's niece on the Wade side, a daughter of Bert's sister, Martha Wade Miller. Anna and Richard have a farm in Texas where they grow crops like cotton, tomato, citrus, etc. Milan Richard Cray is her oldest son, or their oldest son, Libby's grandson, and he's been serving in the Navy and is now discharged. He's on this side of the picture with his brothers. July 27th, 1946. Cold and rainy and so dark. Mrs. Newberry, Hattie, and Mr. and Mrs. Morse went to visit Mark Newberry's. Mary R. here a while. Mr. Kolosik brought us 10 pounds of honey at 30 cents per pound. Was glad to have it. Clara Newberry, in this picture on that side, is Libby's elderly neighbor, and Hattie Newberry Killian is her 55-year-old daughter who has moved back to North English to care for her. Charlie and Neva Morse were also neighbors, and they are going to visit Clara's son, Mark Newberry. July 28th, 1946. Rebecca and IOF picnic today. Rainy in the AM, so it was at the hall. We didn't go. Russell went to the creek. I was alone most of the day. The riders are out for their yearly big ride. Mary R. brought us some eggs as she went to Hardee's. Winston was here. Said Harold is back to San Antonio. Rebecca Lodge, that Libby belongs to, is for women, and the IOF, or International Order of Odd Fellows, is for men. They were a Protestant, religious-based organization, and their meetings were held upstairs at the brick building just a half a block west of Libby's house at the north end of Main Street, which was called the IOF Hall. Russell, her son, loves to fish. Winston Claypool is Libby's 8-year-old great-nephew, the grandson of her older brother, Verner Claypool. And this is Winston and his wife, Carolyn, and their oldest grandson. Harold Claypool, that he was talking about, is his older brother, who was in the service station in San Antonio, Texas. July 29th, 1946. Warmer again. I washed in the AM and canned apricots in the PM. Mary R. rang and said Charlie Wade died in Missouri, a brother to Ed Wade. I had a letter from Mary Welch Carter. Millard and Molly had visited them a few days ago at Longview, Washington. An explosion at O.L. Thomas's. Charlie Wade from Missouri, who passed away, was a brother to Ed Wade from Iowa County. He would have been a great uncle to my friend and listener Shirley Glider Knight from the class of 1969. Mary Welch Carter was Libby's old friend from childhood, who had sent her the mysterious letter earlier in the year. Mary is married to William Starkweather Carter, a little boy whose mother was killed in a tragic accident and was raised by the William Carter family and changed his last name to Carter. William Carter, his father, was in our ancestral Carter family, a brother to my great-great-grandfather, Stephen Carter. Libby's cousin, Millard Fillmore Claypool, who was the son of her uncle Glenn Claypool, and his wife Mary or Molly Cheney Claypool from North English visited them in Washington State. We've got a picture in this big Cheney picture of Millard. He's the third one on the top row on the right side. And this picture is one that people might want to come here to see. And this is Molly. I took that out of that picture. She's down at Libby's visiting quite often. July 30th, 1946. Cleaned the back room. Hattie here a while. Learned that the trouble at Thomas's was a gas leak. Leora's children have whooping cough. Warren and Lena went to see Dr. Doyle. They went in Russell's car. They are to take Eileen and Nona to Cedar Rapids tonight to start home. Went down and got a bushel of potatoes and some cabbage from Mary R. Russell went to Cedar Rapids in the PM. Leora Claypool Woodard is Libby's great niece and the daughter of her nephew Otis Claypool. Leora is right here in this picture, and she's also in this picture on that side. She's Libby's great niece, the daughter of her nephew Otis Claypool. Her children were Donnie Woodard and Joanne Woodard Ritchie. Warren and Lena are Libby's second son and his wife. They're in this picture, these two. They went down to see Dr. Doyle in Sigourney. Dr. Doyle was from the Parnell area and was a medical doctor. Russell's car often gets used or borrowed since he has a nice new car. Eileen Cobb Wallace was the wife of Lena's brother, Armand Wallace. Eileen is also a sister to Glenn Cobb and his siblings from North English. The Wallace's daughter is Nona, and they live out of state. Mary Regsager has a large garden, so Libby gathers additional produce from there. July 31st, 1946. One of Juan West's girls has polio. Canned pickles and ironed in the AM. Lena and Judy were here a while. I went over to Verdi's in the PM and then went to see Hattie. She has to keep off of her feet for a while on account of her bad leg. Dr. Geiger was here for a day or two and expects to be home soon to stay. Juan West was a neighbor from Yankee Point, where the family used to live 5 miles northeast of North English. And Lena Wallace Wade is her daughter-in-law, and Judy is their 5-year-old granddaughter. I think Judy's in this picture. Yeah, she's the younger one right there. Dr. Geiger was her neighbor, and he actually lived right over here where the parking lot's at across the street. It was a great big huge house where he lived. That's the end of the diary portion of the program this week. If you have any pictures that you would like to share, or anyone we have featured, or anyone for an upcoming program, please let me know. First thing we're going to do is go back and identify this Morse picture that I showed a little bit ago. First, I would like to say that this is a posed picture taken by Noel Montz in 1954 during the centennial, 1 year before I was born. That's my mother front and center, Mary Etheldean Keller. Mom was engaged at the time, and Dad was in Arizona in the Air Force. Mom and Dad got married in October of 1954, and my dad's name was John Francis Geringer. On the left is my mom's best friend, Leona Morse Bursler, and her husband, Levon Bursler, the parents of Bobby, Bonita, and Barry. They're on this side. Neva McGuire Morse is her mother, and her husband, Charles Morse. They were neighbors of Libby's and the parents of Elsie Arduzer, Leona Bursler, and Ellis Morse. Harry Morse is right here, and his wife, Loretta Dale Bursler Morse. They were the parents of Dean Morse from North English and his sister Harriet Bell, and Donald Morse and Helen Lease. Ellis Morse is right there, and he was married to Evelyn Strasser Morse, and they were the parents of Billy Morse and Dick Morse from Sigourney and Gary Morse from Montezuma, and the grandparents of my friend from Deep River, Tina Morse Widmer, and several others. Another picture I want to share today is this one from 1954. And you'll have to remember that all the men have beards in these pictures. It's not normal for any of these guys to have beards. In the back is John Kirkpatrick. It's the bottom one. We've already talked about the top one another time. Everett Dennison, Fulton Doc Donahue, and Barney Thomas. And in the front are Leo Jordan, Leland Miller, Wayne or Perky Wade, Willard or Dad Thurman, Clifford Cox, and Orville or Salty Classic. The English Valley History Center has been operating on Main Street in North English since 2006. The center operates a museum, monthly programming, a community coffee shop, and provides meeting spaces for groups and organizations. These include family and class reunions, celebrations, gatherings, and club meetings. The History Center offers all of its services by donations only. It does not have annual memberships like other historical organizations and relies largely on private and community donations. It is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and donations are tax deductible. Your support of the History Center would help continue its operations and provide a valuable community asset. Please send donations to the English Valley's History Center, P.O. Box 70, North English, Iowa 52316. Today's feature is about Yankee Point School, which was located 5 miles northeast of North English. The exact address today would be across the road from 273 310th Street. Yankee Point had a church and a school, which are both gone now, and there is still a cemetery named Yankee Point Cemetery, which is 3.5 miles south and east on 315th Street, on land given to the township by my great-great-grandfather Jonathan Claypool, who was Libby Wade's father. An article written by Carl Hogendorn in the North English Record in 1946 about Emma Rogers. She's on this side right here, Emma Welch Rogers, and she'd passed away at the age of 90. Again, I cannot stress enough how important Carl Hogendorn was in preserving our history and being such a link between the past and the present. Emma Welch Rogers was born on July 4th, 1856, and attended Yankee Point School starting when she was 4 years old before the Civil War. In the early 1870s, Laura McKinstry Swope was her teacher. Laura Swope was the oldest resident of North English for many years, and we will have a feature story about her in a few weeks. The Yankee Point School was in Section 17, Fillmore Township, just down the road from the church. The Yankee Point Church was across the road from the Welch home on land owned by Samuel Claypool and later by his daughter Lou Claypool Pettibone and her husband, Oscar Leroy Carter Pettibone. Oz Pettibone, as he was called, or OLC Pettibone, attended Yankee Point School in the late 1860s and 1870s. His daughter, Armilla Pettibone Ballard, attended school there, as did his granddaughter, Grace Ballard Wilhite, who later went on to higher learning and came back to teach at Yankee Point. Mrs. Wilhite said that in 1932 she instructed 27 pupils for a salary of $40 per month. In 1945 she received $140 a month for 8 pupils. Those students were in this top picture. In the front is Helen O'Rourke, who later married Murph Donahue. Janice Ballard, the sister of Chester Ballard and Sheila Knuth, and the mother of Rhonda DeFrance. Gay Hedrick, who later married Robert Moffett. Patsy O'Rourke, Helen Donahue's sister. And in the back are Gordon Carter, David West, Keith Carter, and Mary Lou Rutledge, who married Jim Parsons. And the teacher, Grace Wilhite. Grace reported that her oldest daughter, or that her only daughter, Sharon, who is my faithful listener, Sharon Hagan from Williamsburg, would not be attending Yankee Point, but will be walking a half a block from her town residence to the North English Grade School. From Oz and Lou Pettibone's 50th anniversary write-up in 1934, I learned this. It says the Walshes, but it should be the Welshes. Moores, Carters, Pettibones, and Claypools, and others were the pioneer farmers who broke the prairie with oxen teams to prepare the soil for cultivation and gave that to that section the name of Yankee Point. In the early days of the school year was divided into 3-month terms in the fall, winter, and spring. As many as 55 or 60 pupils attended, children of all ages, with some of the girls being as old or older than the teacher. There was a teeter-totter and a merry-go-round on the grounds, and Mrs. Wilhite spoke of how the double desks were replaced with single desks. I have the chalkboard from the Yankee Point School with several children's names scratched into it. In this article in 1916, it tells about how the Yankee Point School was one of the largest in Iowa County school systems, and many of the students were acclaimed over the county for outstanding academic achievement. All 4 of Libby Wade's children are in this picture: Anna, Wayne, Warren, and Russell, as well as Estill or Shorty Cobb, and Edgar or Ty Cobb, and Bertha Welch that I talked about in one program. There is a Lyman Doyle, who I think is that doctor from Sigourney that Libby's children go to visit. And on the top, in the back row of that picture, this is the same picture right there. That boy is Forrest Rogers Carter, the grandson of Elma Welch Carter, who was the 90-year-old oldest student. Forrest will pass away in October of 1918 at age 16 with influenza. I will have a program on the 1918 influenza epidemic next week. There were several other outbreaks that I have read about that were interesting. One was an outbreak of measles, where the Cobb children had to go stay at their Grandpa Hardy's in North English to get away from it, and also an outbreak of scarlet fever. I am so glad that we have learned how to prevent some of those diseases. I found an interesting article from 1924 that told about a nutrition lady from Ames College who came to Yankee Point Church to get the parents interested in hot school lunch. Amy Carter, who passed away in Libby's diary this week, was the teacher at the time. Each day they would have one hot dish, such as beef stew, potato soup, mashed potatoes, cocoa, chocolate pudding, or creamed potatoes. They took turns bringing what they needed for groceries and then prepared the lunch together on an oil stove with kettles and pans to cook with. Several of the children, including Estill or Shorty Cobb, Grace Ballard, and Mickey Carter Ballard, who were in the 6th grade, wrote favorable reviews of the hot lunches. Here's the review by Mickey Ballard. Now I will tell you what I think of hot school lunches. I think the hot school lunch is all right to have in school, and I think that all school children like to have it. On cold days, it makes us feel good to get something warm to eat at dinner time. When school calls, we can get our lessons better. When we have hot lunches, we divide the things up, and each one brings his share, so know that no one will bring any more than the other. Then we take turns about washing dishes. 2 wash dishes one week, and then 2 another week, and so on until we have all had our turn. On Monday, we do not have anything because we might forget what we were to bring. 3 cheers for the hot school lunch. Viola Carter, grade 6, Yankee Point School. And that was Mickey Ballard when she grew up. According to an article by the late Helen Donahue, there was no article, and also Gay Moffat was in that writing that article. There was no well at the school, and water was carried from the Pettibone Ballard's farm. There was always a school program at Christmas time held in the church building, and the students went to the nearby church to practice for several weeks before the program. There was a luncheon in the church basement after the program. There was a school picnic at the end of the year for former students and families of current students. The list of teachers that Helen Donahue found included Iska Campbell, Lena Wallace Wade, who's Libby's daughter-in-law, Carol Carter, who is the sister of one of my listeners, Virginia Carter Hoppenstedt, Marion Long, the niece of my grandma Bertha Geringer, Esther Feldevard Flynn, and Marvel Scepter Smothers. Marvel Scepter Smothers was the mother-in-law of John Kinzenbaugh of Kinsey Manufacturing. Marvel Scepter Smothers was a teacher of my father, John Francis Geringer. She later received a nursing degree and was working at the English Valleys Care Center as his nurse when he passed away. I remember her telling me that she thought the Geringer boys were so good looking. From the obituary of Iowa Powers Carter, the wife of William Smith or Uncle Dick Carter, I learned that the Yankee Point School was also the site of church services, as Mrs. Carter attended there until the Yankee Point Church was built. I know that my great-grandmother Rosa Carter Claypool, the wife of Libby's brother Benton Claypool, taught at the school before she was married in 1890. According to another article I found in the Marengo paper regarding the closure of rural schools, Yankee Point School closed down in 1949 with the final teacher being Evelyn Gilbert. According to the article by Helen Donahue, the students all went to North English to school, and that would have been by a bus, and the surviving alumni are down to a very few, including my Uncle Chuck Geringer. The Yankee Point School was moved across the road by Milo West to his property to be used for a garage, and it's at the bottom is the picture of it. His grandson still owns that property. The Yankee Point Church that was across the road and west of the school was sold to the Parnell Mennonite Church in 1950 for $800 and moved 3 miles to Parnell, where it sits at 515 Hendrick Street today as a residence. And it's in the Parnell book, and page 129, and there it is right there. I really enjoyed the lunch that we had, the alumni lunch at Bryant's at the mall last week. Sue Ellen Wilkerson Seavey was there and helped me identify the Wilkerson cousins in a picture I'm working on a story on. Lunch at Bryant's at the mall is next scheduled for April 28th at 11:30. See Linda Carter or Alice Stramer for reservations. Dave Jackson says that there are still 7 Hinkletown books left, and if anyone is interested, the Everyone at EV book will be ready for sale after graduation. Thank you, and we'll see you all next week.
And that's a wrap. Good job, Jackie.